In today's video, I will be comparing the value of Tartaglia versus Zhongli, including their playstyle, best artifacts, weapons, teams, and much more. So by the end of this video, you will be able to decide which one's more necessary to pull for your account. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, starting off with Zhongli, his elemental skill, Dominus Lapidus, is the most valuable part of his kit, and if you only press his skill, it will place a pillar that functions as a geo-construct and takes AoE geo damage. The pillar can resonate with multiple constructs at once, like Geo Traveler, Ningguang, Albedo skill, which increases the AoE and potentially increasing the instance of geo damage provided they hit the target. And now, if you hold the elemental skill on the other hand, it releases a quick burst of AoE damage and places a aforementioned pillar with the same qualities as before if it hasn't already been placed. But the cool part is that it also grants a shield that scales off of Zhongli's max HP, as well as greatly increasing the interruption resistance, and it's also providing 20% elemental and physical resistance threat in a small AoE by his pillars. And by far, it's the greatest shield in the game and provides so much comfort in battle that you might forget that the dodging mechanic even exists. As for his elemental burst, Planet Befalls, he summons a meteor that deals a good amount of geo damage, plus adding the petrification status in a large AoE. Enemies in petrification stats are unable to move for a short yet useful period of time. However, by increasing its talent level, you can have a minor increase in its duration, which is nice to have. One thing as a side note is that his burst animation is quite long for a DPS value that it provides, so in cases like Spiral Abyss, where time management is the key to beating it, I would say it's not as good as some other bursts in the game, unless you know you can finish them off with the burst. And now for his talent's priority, Elemental skill always comes first, then elemental burst, and finally the least used part of his kit, normal attacks, which are cool looking to be honest, but it's just not as useful as the other two. And since he is an off-field support unit, he doesn't have that many combos as an on-field character, and in his ascensions he gains geo damage bonus, and his passive utility option is that he refunds 15% of the ore used while crafting polearm weapons, which can be nice if you have a lot of polearm characters and you want to craft some weapons for them. And if you're looking for his constellations, I wouldn't say you should go for it, but I would say his C1 is pretty useful since it increases the maximum number of pillars on the field at the same time from 1 to 2, which will grant you more of an opportunity to get reliable energy regeneration due to it having 2 pillars, effectively increasing the chance to produce more particles, and it also helps boost the effect of a 4-piece Tenacity of Millilith artifact set, which is great. Overall, I wouldn't suggest you go for Constellation since he's pretty good at C0 at what he does, and maximum of C1 is good enough if you want to go ahead and pull for him. As I mentioned, for his artifact, 4-piece Tenacity of Millilith is a great for a shield support Zhongli, and if you place your pillars in a good spot so it hits the enemies for the full effect of the artifact set, and it will be really handy to use this set of artifact. Your other option would be go for 2-piece Noblesse Oblige and 2-piece Tenacity for both purposes of shield support and some burst damage increase, which would be nice overall. And for stat distribution, you can have Sand, Goblet, and Circlet all have HP percentage as their main stat, or for a burst build, you can mix and match between HP percentage, crit rate, crit damage, and geo damage bonus if you really want, but where he shines the most is where he is built as a shield support unit. As for substat of each artifact piece, you should look for HP percentage, energy recharge, crit rate, and crit damage as a substat of each piece of artifact. Now for his best free-to-play option, you can go for Black Tassel, which provides a massive amount of HP and is easily obtainable since it's a 3-star weapon that makes it perfect for his shield support build, but don't fall for his weapon, because his signature weapon is by far one of his least used weapon by every player, because it's not as good as you might think. And overall, stay away from weapon banner, but in this case, really stay out of weapon banner, because you don't want that polearm. It's not as good as you would think. And as a 5-star option, you would want Staff of Homa, which isn't even his signature weapon, and you're not gonna get it that easily. As for teams, I would say he works really well with teams that have charge shot characters that need to finish their combos, that are in need of not getting interrupted in middle of the attacks, like Ganyu, Tenari, Yoimiya, and lately added Linny, and maybe even on-field characters that are DPS like Xiao or Hu Tao. And in conclusion, he brings a lot of comfort to any player that wants to relax in midst of combat, and especially for mobile players that are having a hard time dodging. Could be a night and day difference for them, and would make the combat for those people less frustrating. And keep in mind, if you don't need characters with this option, and then we're going to talk about the other 5-star character of Phase 2 version 4.0, none other than Tartaglia. Speaking of Tartaglia, he was one of the first few limited characters released in Genshin Impact, alongside with his weekly boss fight that can be unlocked during the Leeway storyline if you're a new player. If you're an old player, you already have done it before, like a few years ago maybe. And even though a lot of characters were added in the game, he is still one of the fan favorites. But I think majority of veteran players already have him, and if you don't and you wanted to know more about him, well, I have to say he is a solid unit in the right team. What do I mean by that? Well, it is true that every character works better in a team, but as for him, he is not a hyper carry solo unit to deal a massive amounts of damage all by himself. Instead, he relies heavily on off-field sub-DPS and support characters to synergize with them and be their technical enabler. But don't let that fool you. His elemental skill lets him turn from a ranged bow user to melee stance close range character, with a good AoE to apply Hydro quickly, which is one of the strong parts of his kit. His elemental burst also has 2 different ways, because whenever you're on melee stance, it will look different from when you're on the range stance. And both of them do good damage depending on your enemies and the way your team works. And so he hits like a truck with a proper management of his elemental skill and team rotations. Since you don't want to stay in his melee stance for too long, maybe even for 10 seconds is enough. Because anything more than 10 seconds would be a lot, and the cooldown will be longer, and it will hurt your team, especially in places like Spiral Abyss, and it will ruin the potential of doing more damage. As for his artifacts, 4-piece Nymph Stream is the way to go, because it's his best in slot at the moment, even though 4-piece Hearth of Depth is still a good option, and you can use it if you have any of that set. But it was before this artifact was released. But then again, you can use both of his sets and they would do just fine. As for stat distribution on artifacts main stats, I would say you would want a Sand with attack percentage, since he scales off of attack, and for Goblet go for Hydro damage bonus, and for Circlet you would want either crit rate or crit damage depending on your build, weapon, and other artifact substats. Speaking of substats, for each piece look for crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, elemental mastery, or maybe some energy recharge for a maximum potential. I wouldn't advise crowning his talents, cause he will do great with talent level 8 and 9, and 10 doesn't give him that much of a boost unless he is your favorite character in the game, but priority wise go for elemental skill first, then elemental burst, and at last go for normal attacks if you use his range attack, since his melee stance doesn't benefit from the levels on his normal attack talent. As for a free-to-play weapon option, you can go ahead and use Hamayumi, which is a craftable weapon obtained by Takeshi's quest in Inazuma, which you can go ahead and look for it if you haven't done it already. This weapon enhances normal and charge attack damage that also counts in his melee stance and ranged stance as well. Overall, for team comps, I would say he's a solid character in many teams, but my favorite and most useful in a vaporized team is with Xiangling, Bennett, and Kazuha. And if you don't have Kazuha by any chance, go and replace it with sucrose, which works just fine and even better in some cases. And if you don't know the potential of sucrose, go look at my last video of 5 underrated characters to find out how to build her. Overall, units like Raiden, Nahida, Xiangling, Bennett all work fantastically well with Childe, aka Tartaglia. Also, it is worth mentioning that he's one of the few characters that doesn't directly benefit from constellations because he isn't reliant on them, and it is recommended to stay C0 for free-to-play players and low spenders. All in all, I would say he is a great character. With that being said, keep in mind when you're trying to get a 5-star, whether you like it or not, you will get some of the 4 stars on the banner, and 4 stars on this banner do not synergize with him. And that's a bad thing overall, because maybe you can use each of those 4 stars in a different team, but I wouldn't say they work well in a team with Tartaglia. Then again, if you already have great units that can work well with him and you love him no matter what I say, you should go and pull for him or Zhongli. But in conclusion, both Zhongli and Childe are good units, and we don't know when we're gonna get the reruns next, so don't miss out if you love them and you don't have them already. And if they're not a must-have for you guys, then maybe wait for version 4.1 and go for Nuvolette and Ryothesli, but my advice is to wait for 4.2 and save your Primogems for none other than the Archon of Hydro, Furina. She will be released in 4.2, and all the Archons bring so much value to your account, and I'm sure Furina is no different, and we will see a great kit on her as well. That being said, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to help me out to make more content, and if you have anything you want to share about these banners or my video, let me know down below in the comments and I will gladly read and respond to them. Have a good day or night, and peace.